Good morning and welcome to A New Life with me, Emma McGreevy.
And me, Sylwia Kuśnierz.
In today's programme, we will be discussing the issue of refugees in the Netherlands.
Joining us in the studio are Alfred Kok, who works in a business consulting firm with a background in marketing, and Lars Rensman, professor at the University of Groningen, specialising in right-wing extremist parties, racism and anti-Semitism and human rights in Europe.
The conflict in Syria continues to be the biggest driver of immigration. More than 1 million immigrants and refugees crossed into Europe in 2015.
According to the United Union Refugee Agency, by the beginning of 2016, 135,000 people had reached Europe by sea.
Germany received the highest number of new asylum applications in 2015, with more than 475,000. Hungary is in the second place with 180,000 applications by the end of December. Around 1 million migrants arrived by sea in 2015 and almost 35,000 by land. More than 400 migrants were reported to have died trying to cross the Mediterranean in 2015. Hungary had the highest asylum applications in proportion to its population. Nearly 2,000 refugees per 100,000 of Hungarian local population claimed asylum in 2015. Although huge numbers have been applying for asylum, the number of people being given asylum is far lower. More than 1 million migrants applied for asylum in 2015, but European countries offered asylum to 290,000 refugees. The Netherlands approved 70% of refugees' applications made in the first 9 months of last year, compared with the European Union average of 47%. Last year, 32% of refugees who came to Holland were from Syria. The Netherlands has almost 45,000 refugees.
As we just heard, 70% of refugee applications made to the Netherlands were approved within the first 9 months of last year. Alfred, what are your views on this number? Do you think it could be too high?
It's much too high. Much too high. I think the refugees with their ideology of Islam is a big threat, the biggest threat we have ever faced. I have a sheet, and I think there are, in Islamic view, 9 steps.
Just want to hold that up to
Camera 2.
9 steps to overtake this country. It's not only last year. It's several years, decades. We imported 30,000 every year of Muslims. Amsterdam, most people are Muslim, and it doesn't belong in our country.
Lars, as a political expert, do you think the Dutch government is prepared to accept such a large number of people?
Well, first I think I can't leave that statement just uncontested. I think you just mixed up several different issues. I mean, there are certainly cultural issues with all kinds of immigrants and migrants. We do have to accept that the Netherlands, as much as elsewhere in Europe, we are an immigrant society. There's no future for the Netherlands without being an immigrant society. We have dying populations here and elsewhere in Europe, and I don't think there's a future path without immigration. I'll get later back to the serious cultural issues that we're facing. Many issues, many threats that I do think, to return to your question, the Netherlands is of course not prepared, because no one is really prepared. No one is really prepared to deal with immigration in a sound, foolproof, persuasive way. None of the European countries is prepared to deal with the massive refugee crisis we're facing right now, particularly the Syrian crisis, where we have at least an estimated amount of 400,000 casualties, and naturally many people leaving this country, war-torn country, and basically Europe, including the Netherlands, are a path to freedom or to escape for those refugees. So this is a massive crisis, and the European Union, as much as the Netherlands, have not been prepared. Not been prepared to some extent to deal with the Syrian crisis, not been prepared to deal with the refugee crisis, and of course not been prepared to really develop a sound national and European-wide immigration policy. Because really, let's face it, for the longest time the European Union had, when it established the Schengen Treaty and the consolidation of the European borders, it had a zero immigration policy. And a zero immigration policy realistically never works, because the only thing that you have is illegal immigration then. So there's no consolidated policy, and the Netherlands, as the Netherlands is not prepared right now as a government to deal with other issues from the educational crisis or a welfare crisis, is right now not prepared to deal with this crisis, and we need to develop steps to do so.
Alfred, as you said, you don't agree with the amount of people that the Netherlands is taking in. You've mentioned Islam, but why exactly do you not want these people here? What do you think?
They are not here to flee war. Mm-hmm. They are here for the benefits. They are not. You forgot. You mentioned Schengen, but you forgot Dublin. They wandered through 6 or 7 countries before they reached Holland. Mm-hmm. Why? Why didn't they stay in the other countries? Because there are no benefits. They are after free money, free houses, free care.
Okay. Well, with that said, let's take a look at our first report. Today, we're to meet Elios, a Syrian refugee who has been living in Holland for the past year. Living as a refugee can be very difficult, so we decided to ask Elios how he has created a new life for himself. And here is his story.
No, 10 months in this camp. I was 2 months in another place before. Then I transferred here, and still waiting. It's not any good, it's not any bad also, you know?
Okay, and what's not good about it?
You know, nothing is good about being stuck in the woods, you know? That's my opinion. I know they give us place to stay, and but it's not fair that they lock us way too far. They keep us isolated, and like people also from the cities like avoiding us, you can see, because they don't deal with you. They don't know who you are. So
is that hard for you? Like,
yes.
People don't want to talk to you, or
it's hard, you know, because you're human talking to another, so you're communicating. You can still communicate. I can still speak a language that you do. I guess.
How do they react when they see you in a bus or on the street?
I don't know, there's a lot of really nice people, but most of the people have this scared look. I don't know what we have done wrong, but I don't know. You can still see it, yes.
Music is one of the greatest phenomenons to connect people around the world. So we decided to ask Elios how he experienced music.
Music, plays that a big part in your life?
Yes, I like music. It helps me relax, get in my space, and I don't know.
So you think of good times when you listen to certain music? Or you just can escape from...
No, it's escape from all the times, you know. Just being isolated in good place, yes. Kind of soft music, I don't know. Yes, reggae, Bob Marley, that kind of stuff. It helps me.
Really mellow music.
Yes, mellow music helps me relax more. Yes, that's the one. Don't you rock? Yeah.
My boo, 'cause I don't want my boo to be rocking.
I don't know, I hear the song usually when I'm high. I don't know. And when I'm not, it reminds me that I have to be high. That's what I think of the song.
You have to be high?
Yes, that's what's...
Why do you have to be high?
Because you have to.
Because if you're not high, you're not happy?
You're fucked up.
You're fucked up?
Yes.
So the music and the weed is kind of an escape?
Combination of... yes, escape.
Okay, So without music or without weed,
You can't survive here, no.
you can't survive here.
I tell you, more than 90% of the people that they're living here are taking, they have to take weed or alcohol or something just to,
To forget all the problems.
yes, not all the problems, to forget about that we're stuck here.
It helps you to get your mind off things.
Yes, which I don't know, they didn't give us that space, so the alcohol and drugs did it, you know?
And the music in combination.
And the music, yes, of course.
What will the future look like for you?
Looks like
If you
Nothing.
If you're honest?
I don't see any future. I don't
Future at all?
know, no.
So you will stay here the rest.
I don't know. I got 5 years now and see what the future holds.
Lars, I'll start with you. Do you think 5 years is enough time for a refugee to start a new life in the Netherlands?
Well, it completely depends on a variety of factors. It certainly depends on the individual attitudes. It certainly depends on the cultural background. It certainly depends on what the Dutch government and the European Union provide in terms of assistance and integration. Sometimes from the right there have been calls that people should integrate better, but there's also the deficiency that there are very few or insufficient government programs in, to some extent, assisting, potentially also forcing immigrants and refugees to get accustomed to European life, to understand our constitutional principles, to understand the political system, to accept the values and ideas that shape our European Union and that shape the Netherlands. And so in some cases that might not be enough, and if there are issues, and I think there are serious issues that we haven't really dealt with, including cultural issues, then there need to be new strategies to cope with them. We have to see that we just, like with anywhere in society, we have to make differentiations. There are groups of people, individuals, who are prone to become a model citizen and of the Netherlands, and others who are not. And that's just the same with Dutch society. We have so we need to kind of face these issues head on. And I do believe, as I said before, that the Netherlands have, as in terms of the government and society, in many ways, of course, have not been prepared to also deal and discuss serious issues that we have with cultural clashes, cultural conflicts, as well as terrorism or Islamists. I do think that to a large extent also it's a failure of the established elites to not address these issues, which has enabled and allowed some of the right to rise and use and utilize and target these issues.
Okay. Alfred, what do you think of Elias's lifestyle, also taking into account what has just been said by Lars? Do you think it is an issue of the Netherlands not putting in place enough strategies, or do you think it comes down to the individual that, as you said, he does not want to work?
I think the Dutch government already tried for decades to integrate Muslims in society. It never worked. They admit it. Integrate with Muslims, it will not work. Even the third generation of Muslims living here, they still say Morocco or any other Muslim country is still my country. They are born in Holland, so they will never integrate. It's an illusion that Islam will integrate in our free Western society. It's a violent, repressing ideology. I don't call it a religion because I don't think it is a religion. It's a violent ideology.
Well, I think the problem here is like these overgeneralizations, really. I mean, clearly there is political Islam, which I reject as much as anyone, where Islam has become an ideology that Islamists are following. And I do believe that to a large extent the European Union and politicians and Dutch politicians actually have not taken a tough enough stance on this. We see the problem right now with Turkey. We have a party now, a Denk party, the Denk party, which is a reflection to a large extent to the rise of the right. And that basically says we agree 100% with Erdogan. We are completely in favor of the Turkish government, and we pretend that we actually have no problems whatsoever. And I see it as part of a polarization of not dealing really with issues, but actually using overgeneralizations on both sides with this new party as much as on the right. Overgeneralizations never work. You cannot say the Dutch are like this or Muslims are like that. You can say political Islam as a religion, as a political movement is dangerous, and we have to face it and deal with it. But to basically say that there's a collective project of every Muslim, every individual, is just a really false overgeneralization, just as there's no collective project of all the Dutch
Could
society.
we maybe say that these overgeneralizations come from personal experience? I mean, some people will say that Islam is a negative thing, but maybe that comes from what they've seen for themselves or what they've heard.
No, I think I don't agree. There are many different nationalities in Holland. We have with no one we have problems. Only with Islamic immigrants. And the only thing they have in common is Islam, and that's the biggest problem.
I completely disagree. I see some of the problems even from immigrants from the Maghreb. When you see like this is an Islamic state, we have 57 Islamic states in the world. These are sometimes not religious things. These are sometimes cultural issues. I agree that there are certain cultural values, for example, when it comes to gender equality, but it's not like Dutch society has always up there on the forefront of gender equality. When you think about it, until the 1980s, the Dutch were the last in the European Union when it came to female employment. So I'm glad we have two journalists now here at the table who are female. This hasn't been the case when you look at the Dutch society in the 80s. So you have to give some space for people to develop. And there is not this one collective project. There are agents, there are actors. We need to identify the problems. We should not negate them. But this over-collectivization or the generalization is simply, no, I disagree. It does not come from a personal experience, because you will experience different individuals, those who are actually deviating from what can be called like an Islamist ideologies, and others who are not. And I do think the polarization is part of the problem. In Dutch society, until 20 years ago, there was the idea of a consensus culture that is targeting to problem solutions. Now we're no longer talking about problem solutions, but it's a polarized political climate, and this will harm Dutch society.
Do you want to show your picture?
Yeah. I think the sheet will tell you enough. Muslims have problems with atheists, with Buddhists, with Baha'i, with Christian, with Jew, with Hindu, with Jain, with Sikh, everything, with gay, with lesbians. They don't fit into our culture, and I think I compare it with Nazism. I don't say every Muslim is a bad Muslim.
Okay.
But if you only have 10% that are bad Muslims. Not in World War II, not every German was bad, but if you have 10%, the other 90% doesn't count.
Yeah. So what you're saying is that because of extremists, the entirety of the Islamic faith has a bad name.
Has a bad name, and I think it will. I showed you the first sheet.
Yep.
I think the Muslims will overtake Europe.
Actually, moving on to that, it could be disputed that people like Elias, who we saw in the report, are abusing the system, as you mentioned earlier, so to speak, moving to westernized countries to take advantage of the benefit system. This map shows us precisely that theory. Could you tell us more about this?
Just the map you provided with us today.
Yeah, I think it speaks for itself. They come to the countries where they get benefits. Why don't they go to Spain? Because there are no high benefits. Why don't they go to the Baltic states? because they don't get free money, free houses, free care. They get it in Germany. Sweden is collapsing under Islam.
It's logical if you are a refugee and you're treated like you were treated in Hungary, really miserably. It's a logical step, like anyone would do this, to actually go to a place once you find refuge to find a better place. I do agree that the current Dublin regulation doesn't work, but it's also because the European Union does not at this point have a functioning immigration and asylum policy in place. And I completely agree we need to regulate this. We need to find better, more comprehensive solutions to refugee crisis, to what kind of immigrant society we want to have in the future. And we also need to take a much stronger take on Islamist extremism. This is a serious problem. For me, this is one of the fight against Islamist extremism, not just in Europe, is one of the key struggles we're fighting. For a long time, we've been fighting extremism on the right. We had extremism on the left. We have Islamist extremism, which is very violent and very brutal. And we need to face this head on and not be charged that this is something like, whenever you talk about Islamist extremism, that this is a matter of Islamophobia. We need to be able to criticize also religious ideologies, just as people have criticized Christian ideologies. There needs to be space for secular approaches. There needs to be space for blasphemism in our society. And this needs to be accepted. Clear cut. I'm absolutely in agreement with that. But we cannot overgeneralize over people. And European society needs immigration, and we'll need to find good proposals to accommodate the challenges of the specific immigration from the countries of the Maghreb and elsewhere, which is still going to be in the future part of European immigrant society.
Can I ask you a question?
Yes.
Yesterday there were, I think it's the first signs of Sharia police. There were anti-Israeli teams, inspection teams, going into supermarkets if there are
they're boycotting products from Islam.
Products for sale. Do you want? I think it's scary. It's very scary.
Well, while you look at for this, let me say let me just say, like, I think the whole what you're referring to, anti-Israel boycotts, these are for me the BDS, the boycott, divest, and sanctions movements. These are profoundly anti-Semitic. They have actually collaborators within Dutch society. Don't think that these are just Muslims. They're also Dutch who have these anti-Semitic beliefs and collaborating with Muslim extremists. Fighting Jews and Israel. So that's not just, it is particularly a problem of Islamist extremism. Yes, and are there also Dutch on the picture? As you can see, yes. So this is a problem of anti-Semitism among Muslim extremists and Dutch extremists who hate Jews and Israel.
Okay, thank you.
But how anti-Semitic is it to import masses of anti-Semitics?
I do think it's a profound problem if we need to challenge those values that are in conflict with our constitutional values, with our constitutional liberties, with our understanding that we reject as a Dutch society and as a European society, we reject anti-Semitism, we reject racism, we support liberal democracy, and we need to fight and defend liberal democracy. Okay. Also in the cultural sphere, I completely agree. Anti-Semitism is absolutely unacceptable, and people need to be educated and trained. And that also actually applies to Dutch society, because there's a lot of Dutch politicians who have had a horrible view on this issue you just mentioned.
Okay, thank you. With that in mind, we go to our next report, which shows a very different refugee lifestyle than that being discussed here in the studio.
working as a journalist is make me like I have supervisors, which I cannot. This is my personality. I need to start my own movement, my own blog. And that time, in 2013, I started to make a film. And I finished film already, film it in Lebanon about Syrian workers. So I finished it in Netherlands because my job as a journalist gave me enough money to buy computer and to buy editing equipment and finish the film. In Syria, I studied journalism, but I never work as a journalist. I just work as a teacher for kids. And next step, I want to make films. I want to make a promotion, video clip, music video, series, films, all of it about women and about women issues in the Middle East and North Africa, and also women who live in Europe, because also they need empowering. Is it difficult to get where I am now? Actually, no, at all. For me, the difficulty was in Syria to Lebanon to film, because it's not easy to trust, to people trust you, especially you are with camera. And that was the difficult part. Here it was easy part because the country here is really supporting women and supporting refugees, supporting Syrians, and supporting people who have a project, like real project, and they are really ready to work, ready to prove themselves. So it's the opportunity there, you just have to take it. This really going in Netherlands, this year actually. Before it was really harsh. A lot of refugee coming, and Netherlands is not prepared for this. I think all Europe was not prepared for this. So it's kind of shock. So in this year, they start to have kind of organizations, small groups, Dutch groups, they are offering to do, supporting some kind of Syrian project, because Syrian people really want to work, and they have skills.
Doreen has been living in the Netherlands for 3.5 years now, and she is very work-orientated and wants to work. And no doubt she isn't the only one, considering there are 45,000 Syrian refugees in the Netherlands. So seeing this example, do you not think that perhaps the Netherlands could actually be benefiting from refugees?
Look, this is the reason why the Merkel government, among other things, it's not just about humanitarian issues and human rights and our responsibilities in that respect, which exists as free, liberal, democratic societies. It is also, of course, for economic purposes, why the Merkel government has decided. We had previous immigration policies that didn't really work. We did not lure specialists and others into our country, and she actually saw it as a chance. And this is, to some extent, again, a necessary step to ensure a constant immigration of those who are actually able and then willing to build something within our European societies. I don't think there's ultimately an alternative route, but how we deal with this, how we manage issues, really depends on ultimately the political will and the political decision making to find proper ways, to find proper laws, to find proper policies, and to also, within the public sphere, address those issues that have been discussed here and mentioned. We can certainly not tolerate to have Sharia law trump our democratic laws in society. That is unacceptable. We have to face Islamist extremism as we have to face other forms of extremism, racist extremism, anti-Semitism, and others. And this is the way forward on the level of cultural policies, of institutional adjustment, and of a legal framework that allows this to work. I don't think there's any alternative.
Okay.
Anything else is ultimately propaganda.
And Alfred, what do you think? Do you think that...
I don't think we need them in economic ways.
Do you think they're not helping us at all?
No. This is one example. I didn't react on the first example. I think this guy will never work.
Yeah.
It will only cost
Yes.
money.
But do you not
this
think
is one
that-
example, and there are maybe examples that are integrated and are working. But I think most and numbers tell us most of them don't work here.
But do you agree this is a much better example than the previous report in that they can progress here in the Netherlands and they can do something for the Dutch society?
No.
No. Would you not be more
I
open
think
to welcoming
we
refugees?
already have a problem with I think 600,000 unemployed.
So would
at
you
this
say
time,
that more-
the Dutch are discriminated by the Muslims.
So do you think that before accepting refugees, Dutch society should help its own people to find work?
Yeah, first our own people, and not only work. In Amsterdam, people have to wait
nonsense.
9 years for a house.
No,
then
but it's
again,
economic nonsense. That's a problem of housing policy. We have a failed housing policy in the Netherlands. We all know that, but that's a different issue. So immigration policy is another issue. Economic policies is one issue where you can clearly see this is economic nonsense, what you just said. It really is not true that the Dutch are waiting for jobs to pick asparagus on the fields. It's just like you see irregular migration to a large extent works on patterns responding to economic needs. Everyone knows that. Everyone knows who's involved in migration regimes and migration steering. So the economic data are simply, for what you just said, are simply not there.
Well, Alfred,
Again,
surely you agree with Lars in regards to, this is a much better society and you have, people struggle getting jobs in every country, regardless of refugees, regardless if you have anyone else to help. So, this is an issue already in Holland, it's an issue in Ireland, it's an issue in England, it's an issue everywhere.
Yeah, I know.
So,
do you think that maybe if a
we don't
refugee
need
is
Muslims
coming...
to do the job,
But
there are, out of the European society, there are already immigrants.
Yes, but do you not think that
Polish
maybe there's
people
an issue...
are also working here.
If there's an issue regarding, you said maybe 600,000 people are unemployed, and a refugee having no language skills in Dutch manages to find work, do you not think that says that the 600,000 unemployed are not trying hard enough?
I think they do try hard enough, but I think they will never find a job, even if Dutch people can't find a job here.
But if people
I
just saw Dutch have a
don't
job...
agree that the Dutch don't want to pick asparagus. They also want to do that.
Not enough. Clearly not enough.
So in regards to the report we've just seen in Doreen's case, do you think the refugees are misrepresented, by the media?
No, I think, look, the problem is that we are way too polarized in the debate. And you have, on the one hand, a culture, what I call a culture of denial, denying issues, denying that there's anti-Semitism, denying that there are huge problems of cultural baggage, of gender discrimination, and so forth. And these are issues we need to tackle. There's no beating around the bush.
Yes.
At the same time, we have xenophobic agents and parties who overgeneralize and discriminate against Muslims or immigrants at large. And this is not helpful either. None of these positions are actually looking at the real issues we need to address. And they, to some extent, to a large extent, I would say, they evade the issues that we need to address. And there are real issues. And if we do not tackle them, we will face bigger problems in the future, either on the side of a policy or culture of denial, or on the side of let's just keep our closed Dutch society as if we would not face humanitarian crisis in the world, as if we would not be part of a globalized world, as if we simply cannot close our borders and build a big wall around the Netherlands. It's impossible, it's unfeasible, it's not going to happen. So I'm looking for practical, realistic solutions dealing with the real issues, and there are tremendously tough issues that we need to tackle, but not what I call these kind of la-la land positions on the left and on the right, if you will.
I think the solution is in taking care of the refugees in the region, but not in Europe. They don't belong here.
So
They don't fit in here.
you don't agree with what Lars has
Culturally.
just said. Do you believe they are portrayed correctly in the media or not? Do you think that?
The media, I don't watch media at all.
Well, I mean, in regards to the
I
news,
think
the newspaper.
it's the state media, controlled by the state. They are full of lies. They show things they want to show you, and they leave things that
So
the people.
you disagree with the way the media reports the
Yeah.
refugees? Okay, thank you.
It's a big lie.
So, moving on, we heard earlier in the week that a refugee camp just closed in Greece. This was the largest refugee camp, hosting 8,500 refugees. Lars, could you tell us what this says about Europe and how they treat refugees?
Well, I think we need a European, as I said before, a European-wide proposal, a European-wide way to go about these challenges. We need to find a solidarity among European countries that establish quotas appropriate to what countries can accept.
How can we decide what these quotas should be for each country?
Well, that's very, very easy to... the problem is that there are national interests and national struggles. To decide on that is very easy. You can look at economic capabilities, economic needs. You can look at the size of a country, the size of a population, etc. So you can establish ways to where you think what is appropriate to, and we see the variation there. And it's not appropriate for Greece to be facing all these challenges by themselves. So Dublin doesn't work in this case. In Hungary's case, it didn't work, right? You cannot have this stream of refugees going to Hungary, a country that is especially hostile towards refugees, is treated them in a poor way, and then is supposed to host this huge amount of refugees. In Greece, we have the crisis, and to a large extent, Greece is left alone by the European Union. They're facing a sovereign debt crisis. They have a massive economic crisis. Now they have a tourism crisis because the places where refugees arrive are free of tourists now. So these are multiple crises. We cannot leave Greece alone. We need to find, once again, a consolidated European policy from which also all European countries will benefit. I'm highly skeptical of the agreement with Turkey. Turkey is not a reliable partner. It's a country on the brink of becoming a dictatorship. We need to find European solutions instead of making more agreements with dictators.
Okay.
And yes, we also need to face, of course, the issues of the countries of origin. No question about that.
Yes,
but if you have a nice solution to the Syrian crisis at hand, how we can finish that war, I'll be the first to sign up for it.
It ain't only Syria. Half Africa is coming to Europe. Also, from countries there is no war. They're not flying from bombs or anything. They are only coming to get a better life.
Do you think...
Economic...
Sorry, going back to this camp, do you think that the closure of the camp is a positive thing, or do you think that now, obviously these refugees have to go somewhere, do you think that there'll be more of them in mainland Europe and perhaps maybe even in the Netherlands?
He said it already, Dublin doesn't work. The refugee chooses where to go. It is not told to him where to go. Baltic states, Letland.
Yeah.
It's a free country, no war, but they don't go there. So they have to be told, you go there, you go there. They can't, you have to take care. They can't choose.
That's a likely and reasonable proposal to do that, absolutely. And we also need, because it can't be a completely unequal distribution above the heads of the members of society. There's no question about this. But we also need to distinguish, of course, in the long run, when we have a more sound policy, that we need to understand that there are refugees that need to qualify as refugees, and there are questions of an immigration policy, right? So the immigration policy should not be equated entirely with the refugee policy. Because of the crisis, this is what's happening right now. So countries like Germany have seen that, okay, this is a refugee crisis, and we're using it, replacing a non-existent immigration policy. So what we need in the long run is, of course, to have a sound immigration policy, with a vision for the European future, And that also entails the question of how to integrate immigrants into our society in a much more sound way than we've done in the
That's an
past.
illusion. They will never.
And on the other hand, we need to also have our responsibilities as liberal democracies that we host refugees who are escaping from actual political persecution and war.
I'm sorry, there's only time for one more question, but this is to both of you. Do you think the crisis will be ever fully resolved? When, if ever, will Syria be safe again?
I think they will a civilian war.
Yes?
Yeah.
I also see, I see particularly after Obama's failure to establish a red line at a certain point, Syria seems lost at this moment. But there's also the European responsibility to have a more sound policy in foreign relations and basically and fight not just the Islamic State, but also to address the problem that the Assad
for the Europeans to come together
to come together also and take a stance against the Assad regime that has been murdering people on a mass basis and has been helping creating such a power that ISIS has.
That's not only affected just Syria, but people around the world also.
Well, as the war in Syria continues, we can only wait and see how and if the crisis will be resolved. Lars, Alfred, thank you very much for joining us in the studio.
Thank you.
It's been a pleasure having you here. I'm afraid it's time for us to say goodbye now. So once again, I'm Sylvia Kushniash.
And I'm Emma McGreevy.